Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We have made HVAC manufacturers mad, we've made contractors mad, and we've made financing companies mad. And in this video, we might even make some insurance companies mad. But before we do, please take a moment and hit that subscribe button. Thank you. Hey guys, today we're going to talk about different ways that you could possibly end up getting a new heating and air system bought for you completely free. And that is if something were to happen to that system, that your insurance would cover it and they would end up replacing it at no charge for you. And in fact, if you've caught this video, we're going to do a whole series of videos, a lot of secrets that insurance companies don't want you to know about your homeowner's insurance. So definitely check out that playlist if you catch this video. But I was talking to a friend of mine. He's kind of a part of that world. He does insurance claims and adjustments, or I'm not exactly sure what all he does, but he knows way more than I do about it. And I'm going to put a link to his YouTube channel in the description. So definitely check that out. He's told me all kinds of stories, things like wedding bands being replaced, folks not knowing that the insurance company would cover that. He's told me other stories about, different parts of the house because it was detached from the house and they were using it for this or that, and they ended up not covering it because of that reason. I don't know. He knows way more about insurance stuff than I do, so definitely check out his channel. But we were talking about the things that I'm going to go over. We're going to talk about 12 different things that most insurance policies will cover on your heating and air system. And if you Google HO3 policies, that is typically the guideline. That's something that insurance companies will typically use, and then they may add to it or change something, but that's sort of the outline. So if you Google that, that will kind of usually give you a general idea of what your homeowner's insurance may or may not cover. Just realize you want to get your hands on your own policy so you can read what exactly is covered and the wording and things like that. We're going to talk at the end of this video about some of the things you need to worry about when it comes to the coverage and whether or not they will actually cover it. But let's get to it. So 12 things that insurance companies will cover if it ends up happening to your heating and air system. So we're going to go through them pretty quickly. The first is lightning. So if you had a lightning storm near your house and it were to affect your heating and air system, if it were to damage it in some way, then they would cover that. The next would be storms. Even if it were a storm that, wasn't necessarily the lightning, but it was some sort of storm that caused damage to your heating and air system, then your insurance may cover that. Next would be a hailstorm. So hail, if hail were to hit that system and damage it, then they would possibly cover that and buy you a new heating and air system. Another one we see a lot here at Griffin Air is power surges. Power surges were not as big of a deal years ago, but as time has gone on, there's more electronics in the systems, there's more low voltage components that can be affected by power surges. That is something your homeowner's insurance, a lot of folks don't realize, will cover in a lot of cases. Another one would be wind damage. So wind, and they even go so far as to say tornadoes. If that were to damage your heating and air system, that would be covered. Another one we probably see in our area more than just about any other claim, and that is trees falling. So if a tree were to fall and damage that heating and air system, definitely check with your homeowner's insurance. They may cover that. Next, we have theft. So if someone were to actually literally steal your system, then that would possibly be covered by your homeowner's insurance. The next one would be civil commotion. And they even, a lot of times, will go so far as to say a riot. So if you had a riot in your neighborhood, which would be kind of crazy where I live, being that I live in more of a rural area. But if you did have some sort of civil commotion or riot damage your heating and air system, then your insurance company may cover that. Next, we have explosions. And I asked my friend who knows way more about insurance than I do, I said, well, what does that mean? Does that mean if the unit explodes, they'll cover it? Or does it mean if something else explodes but then damages the unit, would it be covered? And his answer, we're going to get to at the end of this video. Next, we have volcanic eruptions. So if you live near a volcano, which again, where I live in Virginia, would be crazy, but I do know that, some of you folks on the West Coast, or if you live in, say, Hawaii, and a volcano were to erupt and damage your heating and air system, your homeowner's insurance may cover that. So that's 10. The final two are typically added coverages, so you would have to add it to your policy if you want that to be covered. One being flood. So if you have some sort of flood insurance, something you had to add to your homeowner's policy, typically, and that flood were to damage your heating and air equipment, then they may cover that. And then finally, earthquakes. So if you were to have an earthquake and it damage your heating and air system, then they may cover that. But again, you might have to add that extra coverage beforehand. So that's the list. That's the big 12 that are typically covered by homeowners insurance. Now let's go through a couple things on why they may or may not actually cover those items. The first thing I'll say is to please make sure you get pictures of everything. The big one that jumped out at me that I can remember being involved in years ago was a tree had fallen and damaged a unit, and the homeowner had gotten a tree company to go ahead and cut up the tree and remove it and get it all cleaned up, and they did not get good pictures. And when it came time for the insurance company to cover everything, the homeowner ended up wishing that they had pictures. So make sure you take good pictures of everything. Another one would be make sure you're checking out those added coverages like we just talked about with flooding and earthquakes. A lot of these added coverages, obviously, if you don't live in an area that floods typically, or an area that gets earthquakes, things like that, that's why they'll typically have that as added coverage. But I think you could maybe make that argument about just about anything. So in other words, if I said, well, I don't really live in an area that they have riots, or an area that is near a volcano, you could probably make that argument on just about anything. So just make sure that you are checking out your policy and know exactly what is and isn't covered, so that way you can add that coverage if you think that it's something that you're at risk for. Now, let's talk about the insurance company themselves, because this is the thing that my friend and I were talking about, that he was saying that, when it comes to, say, explosions, that whole scenario, or really just about anything, and that is a lot of insurance policies will be vague about certain things on purpose. They'll leave things out. The verbiage he used was they'll leave it so that it's open to interpretation. And because of that, a lot of times it may give the insurance company a doorway to not covering things. But the thing he pointed out to me is it also gives the homeowner, if they're willing to fight hard enough and maybe even get lawyers involved, that because it's open to interpretation, they actually might have a leg to stand on as well. One thing that insurance companies will do sometimes is they will hire folks that are called public adjusters, and they're basically consultant or adjuster or someone that is considered an expert in the field and is going to back up their claim and say, look, this isn't covered by the policy for this reason or that reason. And the insurance company a lot of times will hire these folks so they don't have to cover certain things. It's really all about money. So if your claim is going to be this gigantic claim and they think they have a leg to stand on, they think that, for whatever reason, they don't have to cover that, then they'll sometimes get some help to prove that. And because of that, it may mean that you might require proof sometimes. So for example, years ago, I remember being hired by a company to look over a system, and the homeowner was saying, well, lightning damaged my system, or another one might be power surges. A lot of times the homeowner is going to want some sort of proof something actually happened. So for example, if you're saying lightning damaged your system and there was no thunderstorm that night, you may have a problem there, right? And the insurance company may decide not to cover it for that reason. And I'll say this, if you were to have a system fail and only one component failed, for example, if you were to say, well, a power surge ruined my system, versus if the heating and air company found multiple things wrong, if that power surge ruined the control board, the motor, all these different components, chances are a power surge definitely did cause that problem because it ruined all those components at once, if that makes sense. And the last thing I'll say with that is just make sure you're doing your part and you can prove it. So in other words, if you have a system that has failed, right? So if you have this 20-year-old system and looks like it's never been maintained, it's in pretty sad shape, a lightning storm may actually have killed that system eventually, but the insurance company may be able to say, look, this system is in such bad shape, it was going to fail anyway. So I'll just say, just make sure you're doing your part and taking care of your system, having it maintained properly, so that way if something were to happen, then you are more likely to get coverage. So that's pretty much the gist of everything. If you have a story with insurance and your heating and air system, comment below. I'd love to hear it, good or bad. I'm just curious that, with a lot of the things that happen today when insurance companies get involved, sometimes there's good stories, sometimes there's bad. and I'd just be curious to know what your experiences have been. Again, this is a series. We're going to do a few more videos on insurance and heating and air. Definitely check those other videos out. I appreciate you watching. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.